So if you can suppress knowledge, you suppress perception, you put people in a mind prison that can control them from cradle to grave.
The most important decision that humanity is going to make that will determine which reality we choose to experience.
That all the way through, no matter what the culture, no matter what the period or the era, the few have always controlled the many.
Enough people are perceiving this other realm of reality beyond the nature that we've been taught.
Time is an illusion encoded in this reality. Lay this out in the roadmap is a simulation. It's a simulated reality. So once you've got a situation where you are in a simulated reality, you can manipulate not time, but the perception of time and the perception of events and experiences passing either slowly or quickly.
Before today's transmission, I wanted to take a minute to let you in on something that could change your life. If you've been doing the inner work and still feel like you're walking this path alone, you're not the only one. Most spiritual spaces give you endless content to consume, but not a tribe to grow with. That's why we created The Deep Dive, a living spiritual ecosystem designed to help you grow in community, rhythm, and real embodiment. Right now, our members are embarking on a journey exploring a core spiritual and practical teaching through daily activations, live community gatherings guided by me and our facilitators, and also participating in sacred challenges that are designed to help you live your practice and bring it to life. You'll be surrounded by seekers and leaders who've decided that they're done doing this work in isolation. If you're ready to find your people, visit the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen right now, and I'll see you inside. David Icke, welcome back on Just Tap In, brother. I wanted to start off asking you, what do you feel that humanity is finally getting right at this time in our history?
Well, when I started out on this long journey in 1990, well, consciously, I was doing it before, I just didn't realize it was. But in 1990, it became a conscious journey. Virtually no one, by comparison with now, was interested in any way in this information. It was too far out. It was too much of a stretch for people to think it was happening. And yet now the numbers are phenomenal that are seeing that at least on some level there's some kind of conspiracy going on, which is not good for humanity. The reason I've written my new book, the Roadmap, is for a very specific reason, which relates to the question. I've seen people awakening to some levels of this conspiracy, but I've also seen people have come into the so-called alternative media from the mainstream who have basically hijacked the central core of it that gets all the algorithmic support, whereas others don't, and all the funding too that comes from that. And there's been, we have a thing we call the Overton window in the mainstream of society, which is that range of acceptable thought, acceptable opinion. And when you go outside of that Overton window, what's called the normal, suddenly you're mad or bad. And that Overton window changes and moves as new information comes to light and becomes accepted as reality. So, the Overton window in things like health, etc., has changed from the days where we used to put leeches onto people to suck their blood. Um, but there's always been, in every society, there's been this normal opinion, this normal range of acceptable thought and view. Now, the alternative arena also has an Overton window. And I say it shouldn't have, because we are in a reality which is designed specifically, I'm sure we'll get into that, to stop us knowing, to keep us in a state of ignorance, aware enough to behave and serve the system, but not awake enough to see that the system is a means of mass human control. And so what's happened with this kind of hijack of the alternative arena since COVID is that this Overton window has come in and basically held the perception of the conspiracy in the range and the realm of politics and finance and the world of the scene, shall we say. And so what I've done with the roadmap is to present a vastly greater picture in which, yes, I go into the political realm, but as a play out of the big picture, which is that a non-human force is manipulating human society from another dimension of reality. And if people hear that for the first time, they go, what? But the evidence to support that is tremendous. But this Overton window of the alternative media prevents that being explored. And that's why I'm setting out with this book to dismantle those walls of limitation and say to people, not you must believe what I say, but hey, there's a completely different way of looking at this world, even vastly different to the mainstream of the alternative media. And the scale of the conspiracy is vastly greater than you're being told. And ironically, it's when you get into that bigger picture of the situation we're in that you come across the answers. Because at the political level, which is basically where it's held, there are no answers. What's the answer to voting for Trump or someone of the left? To vote for someone of the right or someone of the left as the alternative to whoever's in government at the time. But when you kind of dig a little deeper, and you don't have to go very deep for this, you see that the same force is manipulating through the left and is manipulating through the right. And, you may see different rhetoric. You may see different excuses. You may see people apparently saying different things. But when you look at the outcomes of both a left government and a right government, the direction of travel is the same. It's going in the same direction. With some, it may go in that direction slower or quicker, but it's the same direction. And I'm trying to break that um, cycle by um, putting forward a completely different way of seeing the world and seeing ourselves, our self-identity, and um, and also to point out that if you're trying to control billions of people and you are a few, there are a few things that need to be in place. One is that you have to keep from the people, the target population, the nature of how they're being manipulated. You can let them have a myopic view of that if some people awaken to the fact that there's a political conspiracy or whatever, but you mustn't let them see the big picture, because that would be catastrophic for you. Uh, and you must have in place two other things for the few to control the many. And when you look through what we call history, you see that all the way through, no matter what the culture, no matter what the period of the era, the few have always controlled the many, bar a few random different ways of doing things. But overwhelmingly, the few have always controlled the many. So therefore, the structures and the methodology necessary to do that have been in place all the way through to present day. And so when people ask for solutions, I say, I'm not interested in solutions, because solutions always lead to more problems in search of more solutions. I say what I'm looking for, if you have a problem, a situation you want to change, is what is the cause? Because if you remove the cause, the problem must disappear. And so there are two foundation ways in which the few control the many. And one is you have to get the many to become enslave themselves with rigid, unquestioning belief systems. These can be religious belief systems, largely are. They can be political belief systems. I am of the left, I'm of the right, or whatever. Cultural belief systems. Anything that is unquestioning and rigid. I've said many times that this global cult, as I call it, this network of secret societies that's behind the direction of the world, it doesn't care what you believe, so long as you believe it rigidly and without question, because then it's gotcha. Because what happens when you have a belief system, take a religious belief system, but they all work the same, is that you have a limit. You build walls to infinity, walls disconnecting you from infinity, the infinity of possibility, of potential, of insight, of knowledge, because you're not moving beyond your belief system. Because if you do, your belief system just falls apart. And people have this desire, I don't understand it, well, I do understand it, but I've never felt it myself, the desire to be part of a group. I have no desire to be part of a group. I'm quite happy to be an expression of consciousness and let everyone express their consciousness as they see uniquely fit. But because when you become part of a group, a lot of things change, like the walls go up. Because if you go beyond the walls of the belief system, you're no longer one of us. You're no longer a Christian. You're no longer a Muslim. You're no longer a Hindu, etc., etc. So you create these limitations of possibility called belief systems, and then you've got the perfect situation to play off the different belief systems against each other to divide and rule the population. So your target population is now fighting among itself, with itself, and therefore not seeing that all the different factions and um, beliefs are being manipulated by the same force. And the thing is, of course, that another prerequisite to the few controlling the many is that somehow the few have to manipulate the many to give their power away to them. And how do they do that? Well, this is what we call authority. And this is what we call politics. This is what we called for centuries and thousands of years monarchy. So you have a situation with the monarchy, and we still have a monarchy in Britain, staggeringly. But you have a monarchy, and through the centuries and the thousands of years, which through genetic inheritance was the leader of the population, and you didn't have to be intelligent. Vast numbers of them weren't. You just had to be of a genetic line, and that allowed you to be the monarch. In other words, calling the shots of a vast population. When humanity reached a point of maturity where it wasn't having that anymore, although we still have it in some parts of the world, they replaced the monarchy with politics and political parties. And this was just, and people then thought, okay, that's good because we now can select our government. But you see, if you're given the choice of selecting party A or party B or party C even, but the same force is controlling all of them at their inner core controlling center, then it's not a choice. You're choosing between different masks on the same face, and ultimately you're going to go in the same direction. Slower sometimes, faster other times, whichever you think you're selecting. And what that is doing is replacing the monarchy, where you give your power away to the monarchy without without having any selection process, to apparently selecting the government, but actually you're not in truth. So the political period since the demise of the monarchies has been one of another reason and way and means of giving your power away. So we have this thing called an election, which is an absolute farce anywhere, because there's no contract between a political party or a political leader and the population that they're asking to vote for them. In an election campaign, and we've seen this massively in the UK with a guy called Keir Starmer, and massively in the United States through Donald Trump, whereby the party or leader tells you what they're going to do and tells you what they're not going to do in the election campaign. You think, okay, well, yeah, I'll go with that. So you vote for them and they get in, but there's no contract. So when they get in, as we've seen in the UK with Starmer and in America with Trump, they do what they said they wouldn't do, and they don't do what they say they would do. And so what that means is you have now given your power away over your life to someone else, the few representing the cult, for another 4 or 5 years. And if you stay at that level only of politics is the answer, it's the problem, but it's also the answer, well, it's not, then in another 4 or 5 years, you get the opportunity to go through the farce again. And this time you might vote for the other party. But then the other party does the same and gets into power. It doesn't do what it said it would do, and it does do what it said it wouldn't do. And the direction of travel is basically the same. And so you 4 or 5 years hence have only one real way of getting rid of the party B, and that's to go back to vote for the party A, and round and round and round and round it goes. And these are all means of giving your power away. And yet we're supposed to have 8 billion people in the world, and the number of people in full knowledge who are directing the direction of the world is tiny by comparison. And thus, the only way that few are going to control the many, even with politics, is for the many to acquiesce to the dictates of government and politicians. So if a politician, a leader, a president, a prime minister says we've decided to do this, and enough people say we're not doing it, they have no power. The power of politicians, thus the cult behind the politicians, is in persuading the population to give their power to the few in the form of acquiescence to what the few decide is going to happen. If you look at America now, you've got this guy, Trump, who is so deeply corrupt, it's unbelievable. I mean, oh dear. I mean, just shockingly corrupt. And he's running America, one man America, that's starting to unravel now, thank goodness, through executive orders, which is an aide to Bill Clinton once said, executive orders are swish of the pen, law of the land. So this one man is saying, this is going to happen and I'm signing an executive order. Congress has given up its right to police that. The Supreme Court, which has a Trump majority, is going in his favor again and again. And so you basically have an America that claims to be a democracy or a republic and claims to be a land of freedom that is currently controlled by one bloke. But then you ask the question, yeah, officially that's true, but who's dictating to him? And this process of giving your power away to the few through acquiescence to the few has gone on throughout known human history. And that's how we got in this situation. And we are not going to get out of it by continuing to do the same.
I love that you brought up these unquestionable, rigid belief systems that maybe have been instilled in the operating system of humanity for centuries. I wanted to ask you, what is that one belief system that you have that is the most empowering, that anyone else can also start to embody that liberated you from a lot of these programs that were instilled?
Well, it's not a belief system. What I have is a way I see things at any point. But I also know, as the ancient Greek philosopher apparently said, Socrates, wisdom is knowing how little we know. To know is to know you know nothing. And when you look at the situation that we're in, and for instance, the tiny band of frequency that we can see, it's tiny, you you need a bit of humility in the sense that you realize that whatever you know or think you know at any point, there's always more to know. And so I have a way of seeing things, and I add to that with more information, but I'm willing to be fluid and move as the information and the evidence dictates I should move. Uh, and that is a different way of operating than a belief system, which is without question and uh, rigid. So you've got to know that there's always more to know, and what that does, and this is why I've gone into some really far out areas, shall we say, in the last 36 years now. Um, because when you if you reach a point and you think, got it now, well, you're just confirming you haven't. What you've done is you've got a bit more, but what don't you know? And this principle and process is constantly driving you deeper in the rabbit hole because you're constantly asking, what don't I know? And that takes you into some really amazing places, which I set out in the roadmap. And it's it's a very different way of looking at the world. What the global cult manipulation wants is for you not to go there. And if you do, of course, you've got to be aware that you're going to get ridicule and you're going to get abuse. And this fear of ridicule, fear of abuse, fear of not being part of a group anymore, um, that's a massive disincentive for many people to go beyond the limits you've confined yourself to. So when you start talking about um, things that are happening and how the world works outside of that Overton window normal, you are going to attract ridicule and condemnation because people who are completely attached to that normal are going to think you're strange and even insane. And this is a very, very important point in terms of bringing down the walls of perceptual limitation. And that is to realize that what we're being told to believe is normal is actually only what is being given to us to keep us in perceptual servitude and ignorance. Uh, and so what you are looking at was described in a quote was it a guy called Schopenhauer, a quote, who basically said words to the effect of people mistake the limits of their own mind with the limits of possibility. And this perceptual oppression is founded on keeping people from cradle to grave in a limitation of sense of the possible. If they can squeeze your sense of the possible, they got you. So when people like me say this is happening and this is how they're doing it, because it's outside of the normal, it's dismissed by people who think the normal is the only possibility. And so when you go there, then you've got to expect, certainly initially, and I've experienced this over 36 years now, nearly now, the fact you're going to get ridicule and abuse. But either you want to know the truth or you don't. And if you do, then okay, that's just what happens when you break down the walls of the perceived normal. And what the roadmap is about is putting forward evidence for the fact that beyond the perception of normal is a vast infinity of knowledge, of understanding that puts this world, this reality, in a completely different light to the one that we believe we're experiencing. And so if I had to put it down to one revelation, if you like, it's that we are not human. We are having a brief experience through a vehicle called a body, what I call a biological computer, that allows us to experience this smear of reality. It's not who we are. We are the consciousness having the experience. And ultimately, we are a formless state of awareness. We are consciousness. That's our true I. And the different energetic bodies, vehicles that we take on in the different frequency bands of reality are merely to allow that consciousness, that awareness, to interact with that reality. So I couldn't pick that up with my consciousness, because my consciousness, your consciousness, everyone's consciousness is vibrating so fast compared with the dense frequency of the glass that I couldn't pick it up. I couldn't interact with this reality. But because I have a bodily form, a biological computer that is resonating within the same frequency band as the one I'm experiencing, I can interact with it. I can pick the glass up. But it's not who I am. It's just a brief experience I'm having. We give it names like, my experience is called David Icke. But it's not who I am. It's what I'm briefly experiencing. What I am is a state of awareness. And that self-identity transformation from I am my body, my name, my job, my life story, etc., my race, my religion, to I am a state of infinite awareness that can open itself to the vastness of awareness. And therefore, when you do that, when your self-identity becomes, I'm not my name and all those labels, I am awareness, having a brief experience, that expansion of self-identity takes you and expands your awareness into realms of knowledge, insight, knowing that is beyond the limitations of this human reality. And suddenly you see the world you saw in a certain way before, you see it in a completely different light. And that's the um, that's the awareness that we call awakening.
One thing you've said about the few is that they have highly advanced knowledge about the nature of reality. And in the roadmap, you're exploring things like time, things like speed of light, things like parallel dimensions. And I really wanted to get in there because
Sure.
right now there's knowledge about reality is getting so democratized. Like we can go in and find podcasts like these. We can read all these books. It's not centralized in one library like it was in the times of Alexandria. What have you come to the conclusion about the nature of reality as it relates to time, speed of light, all these other things that I mentioned, dimensions, that we're catching up to from this highly advanced knowledge that some others have had to maybe control some of the perceptual limitations on us?
Right. Well, let's first point out why this knowledge is not accessed yet by the vast majority. It's because there are two worlds within one world. There's the world of this global cult. Now, this is a global network of secret societies. It has an interlocking leadership, an inner circle core that connects into all these major secret societies, and many who aren't major. And through that system of levels, or what people call degrees of knowledge, you can do two things. One, you can pass over advanced knowledge in isolation from the population through the levels of the secret societies. And you can also, through the degrees of knowledge they're broken up into, you can decide who has that knowledge even within the cult structure and who doesn't. So, when I'm talking about advanced knowledge being passed over through the cult, I'm not talking about, a guy in a local Freemasons lodge. I mean, the Freemason network is overwhelmingly, Freemasons are overwhelmingly in the bottom three levels of degree, the so-called blue degrees. They're not aware beyond that, because each level within the secret society decides who in levels below can enter that level. And so it's fiercely compartmentalized, so that even the great majority of people within the cult network don't know the big picture, because the more people that know it, the more likely it is to get infused into the general population. They don't want that. So we're talking about the inner core levels of this global cult, where the information is, the advanced information is passed over, of one the agenda for the world and where it's being taken and why. And two, the nature of reality itself. And actually, there's a third, which is what is actually running the show ultimately. And it's not even in this dimension of reality we call human. The other world is based on suppression of that knowledge and keeping the target population in ignorance of it. So if you look and you do the research, you find that it was major players in this cult, still not the core of the core, but major players that you can see operating in the public arena. And if you operate in the public arena, you're still a gopher. You're not the inner core of the inner core. But you can look at how they have created the sources and means of communicating information to the population. They created the so-called education system, which is not about education, it's about programming. It's about programming a perception of reality within the target population. If you were looking for a structure through which you could take young people, children, and turn out the adults that see the world the way you want them to see it, then you would have the current education system, which is, like I say, a programming system. You leave the womb and immediately your perceptions are influenced by your parents. And your parents have been through the same system you're about to go through. So those first initial years, your parents, not through malevolence, can be, but overwhelmingly not, are passing on their programming to you. Not because they want to harm you, but because they have been convinced that's the way things should be. You then go to school, and now teachers representing the state with the state curriculum are telling you what to believe about everything. They're telling you when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can eat, when you can go to the toilet, when you can talk. And this goes on throughout your formative years. You go on to college and university, and the same thing happens. You're being told what to believe. You're not being taught how to think. You're being taught what to think. And then you go off into your job, profession, whatever, at the end of this, and you're meeting all those people that have been through the same system you have, but earlier, and have taken on, again, all but the relative few, the version of reality and perception that's been programmed into them. And this is how these normals are formed. And anyone that steps out of that normal is a kind of, or asks questions that the teacher actually can't answer, except by repeating the official story. You become known as a disruptive influence in the classroom and a problem child or whatever, when all you're doing is saying, show me that what you're telling me is true. And then you look at the media. Now, we're now at a point where those that control the major media corporations are tiny. You know, one of my books, I I look at the ownership of a company called at the time Time Warner, and it's extraordinary. I just list the broadcast, TV, um, Hollywood, radio, newspaper, magazines that this corporation owns, and it goes on for pages. Um, so you're looking at this cult again, creating and owning the media. And so the media takes the way that it reports the world from the perception of the normal, which the cult wants us to believe in, the same normal that is uh, indoctrinated through the education system. So, from all angles, at all levels, people are being told the same sense of normal. And so, we shouldn't be surprised that um, people believe it and develop these rigid belief systems of what's normal and what's not. So, the difference between the world of the cult and the world of the population is simply knowledge. You know, if I said to people that there was and they knew nothing about computers or Wi-Fi, and I said to them, you know, there's a field of radiation with encoded information which you can tap into anywhere in the world where it's generated, and it's a whole reality, a whole sense of reality, just in the energetic atmosphere that we call empty space. The reason it appears empty is because it's outside of this ludicrously narrow band of visible light, as science calls it, that is all we can see. If I said that to people who knew nothing about Wi-Fi and computers, they would say I was mad. Why can't I see it? They would say. But because now people know about computers, they know about Wi-Fi. When I say the same thing, they say, "Oh yeah, I know about that. Yeah, Wi-Fi, computers. Yeah, I know about that. Yeah, everyone knows that." And the difference between "you're mad" and "everyone knows that" is knowledge. So if you can suppress knowledge, you suppress perception, you put people in a mind prison that can control them from cradle to grave. And so it's that um, suppression of knowledge that is the goal of the cult, while at the inner core, advanced knowledge is passed over and through the levels of initiation. And so this is the foundation throughout human history. This is the reason that humanity still controlled today massively, but fundamentally controlled through what we call history by religion. Because not only were people told that they had to go to church every Sunday or else, they were told that if they didn't believe what the church was telling them to believe, then horrific consequences were on their way. And what is that belief designed to do? To keep people in a perceptual box, a perceptual prison. So if we um, go on to the question that you asked about time, uh, what controls people's perception of reality more than time? We're constantly looking at the clock, but I don't. I don't have a watch. I won't have a watch, and I I interact with time only. Well, I've got to be here at a certain quote time, so I will be. But the rest of it, it just passes me by. So I'm not watching the clock all the time. But um, most people are, and they are controlled by their perception of time and time passing. But as Einstein pointed out, time is relative. It's relative to what you're doing. So sometimes people say, "Oh dear, time's flown, isn't it?" And I don't know whether you've noticed it, but a lot of people are noticing it, and I've noticed it very much so, that the perception of time seems to be getting quicker. It's like, where did
Yeah.
2025 go? Um,
Why is that?
well, we can get into that because time is an illusion encoded in this reality. And this reality, I would strongly suggest, and I lay this out in the roadmap, is a simulation. It's a simulated reality. It's like a vastly more um, advanced version of a computer game, basically. And so time can be manipulated. Things and what is time? Time, as we perceive it, is simply the speed at which we believe events are passing. So it's like you can put a video on and it can play a certain speed, or you can put it on fast forward and the events pass before you, but incredibly fast. So once you've got a situation where you are in a simulated reality, you can manipulate not time, but the perception of time and the perception of events and experiences passing either slowly or quickly. And we interact with time in that way, as Einstein pointed out. Um, if you're doing something that you like and you're getting great joy from, then time can pass or appear to pass very quickly. But if you are doing something you don't like, or you're waiting for a bus that doesn't come, time can appear to pass very slowly. But the reason is there is no time, and you can point this out. We think that time is moving from the past through the present to the future. And the present is what we can call the now, this moment. But this moment is all that exists. What we call the past is memory, and what we call the future is a projection of the possible future from the now. The past is the memory that's coming from the now. So if you think about it, you can put it this way: uh, where were you when you experienced the past? You were in the now. Where will you be when what you perceive to be the future becomes the now, the present? You'll be in the now. There is only the now. But because of the way the simulation is constructed and manipulated, um, we mistake the apparent passage of and sequence of experiences and events to be what we call time. But everything is happening in the now because it can only happen in the now. There is only the now. But the manipulation of time is a fundamental manipulation of human perception. So, I point out in the books that there is a program running through the body because it's a biological computer. And part of that program is aging. That which has created the matrix, the simulation to enslave our perception, has infused into the biological computer a program which takes the human body through a sequence from birth to whenever our demise comes, our bodily demise, not the demise of our consciousness. And so that perception of aging also delivers the perception of time passing. But it's actually a program. You know, when you get deeply into this, and this is also supported increasingly by many mainstream scientists who have started to see that the way they saw reality before is simply not supportable. They realize that the human body is not a physical entity, and the reality that we are experiencing is not a physical phenomenon. You go into quantum physics below the level of the atom, and suddenly you realize that there is no physical. You know, we're told that atoms are the foundation of the physical world. But if you look at an atom, you see that it has no physicality. An atom is just a an energetic phenomenon. So it's the nucleus, and there's electrons going around the nucleus, a bit like a solar system, if you like. And everything in between the tiny nucleus and the tiny electrons is, to our sense of reality, empty space. It's certainly not physical. And if you go deep enough into the nucleus and the electrons, they're not physical either. But they are supposed to be the foundation of the physical world. It's not possible. Someone came out with a great line pointing out that if you look at an atom and you look at the nucleus, for one example, as a 10-cent piece in America, then the atom, by comparison, has to be the size of a baseball stadium. There is no physical. And what we are experiencing is a physical world that is actually holographic, illusory physical. And we interact with it. And the reason that you can't walk through a wall, it's not because it's solid, it's because it's an electromagnetic field of a certain frequency. And my body is of a different frequency, and therefore I can't go through that there's a electromagnetic resistance. So when you hear all these stories about ghosts, and I've experienced it, I've seen it, where a ethereal figure comes through the room and goes through the wall, people say, from the perception of normal, ah, that's mad. That's not possible. You can't go through a wall. Oh, but you can. If your frequency is vastly different to the wall.
Higher.
That's,
Higher than the wall?
yeah, because you see, these bands of frequency that we call reality, like the very dense frequency of human reality, are like radio and television stations in the analog system, where all the radio stations are sharing the same space, but they're not interfering with each other unless they're very close on the dial, because they're on different wavelengths. You know, if you tune your radio to radio 1, then you get radio 1. You move the dial to radio 2, you get radio 2. But radio 1 doesn't cease to broadcast when you move from your dial from it. Goes on broadcasting. It's just you're not tuned to it anymore. And these bodies, these biological computers, they lock us in, tune us in to the frequency band that we call human. And so when people have near-death experiences where their body dies or ceases to function, and then eventually it's revived and they find themselves back in the body, in the intermediate time, they find themselves in a completely different reality with a completely different law of physics. There's nothing like this one. And that's because these biological computers are interacting with this matrix, with this this simulation. They are taking the information in the field of information, think Wi-Fi, very, very appropriate, and they're decoding it into the reality we think we're experiencing. So just go to mainstream science about how this system works. They just haven't put the dots together. The 5 senses are interacting with this matrix field of information. And that matrix field of information is waveform. You know, frequencies carry information, and their medium is this electromagnetic field. So we have television because of information broadcast in the form of frequency and electromagnetism to the television, which then decodes that information into what we see on the screen. And we have a computer which is doing exactly the same with Wi-Fi. It's locking into that Wi-Fi field of information, the internet, and it's putting it on the screen in a completely different form. A form of moving pictures, of graphics, of words, all these different things. And it's all going on inside the computer. It's not happening here or here or there or there. It's happening inside the computer. And we're just looking in on it. And the human body biological computer works in the same way. So the 5 senses are tuning in to these waveform information fields. They are turning them into electrical form, communicating it to the brain, and the brain has different parts which specialize in decoding different senses. Like the visual part is the back of the brain here. And then the brain takes that information and forms it into a perceived reality. And that reality appears, in the way the brain decodes it, to be external to us. It's what it looks like. That's what we experience it as. But actually, it's all in here, just as it's all in the computer.
Then
And so,
why do we all experience the same reality
well, we
in that
don't.
sense?
We
Mm.
do in terms of the basic background. So, if we looked out of the window here, we might see a car passing, and we both see the car passing. But that's the background field. But what we make of the car, whether we think it's a nice car or a horrible car, or a nice color or a horrible color, um, is our unique spin on that. So our sense of reality is very different. I mean, I've said many times that, if we could just experience how other people are experiencing this world for 10 minutes, we could look through their eyes and access their perception of what they see, we would be absolutely bloody shocked, because the perception is that everyone sees the same world. They don't. They experience the same background stories, if you like, but they don't experience it in the same way. That's down to how much consciousness they're accessing. So we are communicating now, and people are hearing what I'm saying now, and they're hearing words, but there's not words passing between us. There's a vibrational information field passing between us that is generated by my vocal cords. The ears pick up that waveform frequency, they turn it into electrical information, and they communicate it to the brain, which then decodes it into words that we hear. There are methods of pain relief now which involve stopping the message, the signal, going from the point of the pain to the brain. Because if they can stop that signal, you don't feel pain. You have a blow on the shin, say, but it's only when the signal of the impact point goes to the brain that you say ouch. If that signal was broken, you wouldn't say ouch, because you wouldn't feel it. The brain is like taking all this information. It's not, consciousness doesn't come from the brain, it's a processor of information. That's why they can't find consciousness in the brain. And what you're doing is, with the brain, is it's taking all these sources of information, and it's processing them into a sense of reality. Now, this is another very important point. For a very long time, in fact, until very relatively recently, they thought that once the brain was formed, that was it. It didn't change. Now they know differently. It's called brain plasticity. And what it means is that the information the brain is processing, in other words, the frequencies of the information that the brain is processing, dictate the nature of the brain. This takes us into another level of manipulation of perception, because if you are only hearing certain information and you're isolated from the rest, like with a religious belief or a science belief, orthodox science belief, not a religion, then your brain is not going to change. It's going to go on processing information in the same way. The neurons are going to fire in a particular network, a particular sequence relating to the frequencies that it's processing. But when you then get access to other information, here we go, this is why they want to suppress it, that is of a different frequency, a more expanded frequency, shall we say, the brain will start to change as a result of that information change, frequency change. It will start to process information in a different way. The neurons will fire in a different sequence. And that's another level of what we call awakening, where the brain can suddenly access this stuff. And so as you redefine your self-identity from I am my body, my name, the labels of human, to I am infinite awareness having a brief experience as human, you're tapping in to that massively more expanded level of awareness, levels of frequency, higher frequencies, and your brain is then being subjected to that level of awareness, that level of frequency. And what it does is then rearrange the way it processes information on the basis of that level of information. And suddenly you can see things you couldn't see before. And this is what they don't want us to do. There's so many different levels of how ignorance serves the cult and their other dimensional masters in this other dimension they call the astral in esoteric circles. It's not just that you keep people in ignorance of information alone. There are other levels of the consequences of that in the way the brain processes information. And so when people say, why is it that people can't see the bloody obvious? Well, it's not obvious to them because their brain is not processing that level of awareness. So if you have a certain squeezed sense of the possible, then your brain is processing information on the basis of that perception of the possible. And therefore, it will keep delivering a perception that is the limit of possible. When you break out of these mind prisons, religions, orthodox science, cultural programs, and what have you, suddenly you're allowing other information in, and your brain starts to change in the way that it processes information. They don't want any of this to happen because as we awaken to the nature of the I, our power to create our own reality absolutely soars by the perception that's what we're doing.
Right. David, this is fascinating, the pathway that we went into here, because I'm really passionate about the liberation and evolution of humanity. And one thing that we're bringing up here is that more and more people individually are starting to tap into beyond the 1% of reality that we can perceive, 0.0001% of reality that we can perceive with our five senses. People are tuning into things like telepathy, clairvoyance, multidimensional awareness. And I wanted to talk to you about what you perceive is the tipping point when enough people are perceiving this other realm of reality beyond the nature that we've been taught, what will happen to the simulation once enough of us can expand into the infinite I, into that presence? Where do you see that going in the
Well, well,
timeline?
first of all, one of the things that I've been writing a lot about in recent years, and absolutely include in the roadmap, is how um, we are caught in a cycle of reincarnation in which our consciousness, still in a state of ignorance, leaves the body, um, follows up the tunnel or whatever to the light, and then enters what Buddhists call the wheel of samsara, and comes back into this human reality for another, quote, lifetime. And this reincarnation cycle is a trap, because as I go into in the books, I think may have talked about last time, um, these entities that have created um, the simulation are feeding off low vibrational human energy, the energy that resonates to the frequency of fear, anxiety, depression, hatred, conflict, war, regret, resentment, all these things. And so these entities that are manipulating this simulation have no interest whatsoever in creating a world in which people will generate love, joy, um, appreciation, peace, happiness. Now, consciousness can manifest that way. It goes up and down, obviously, but overwhelmingly, they are using this global cult network to create events in our reality that are um, meant to generate from our response to them low vibrational, emotional, and mental energy, which they're feeding off. As I said many times, the humans sacrifice satanic rituals that these people are involved in, these cultists are involved in, are designed to generate an immensely powerful low vibrational energy called terror in the victim, which these entities feed off. Because, we can see someone's emotional state um, by their facial expressions and their body language. What we can't see is the energy that those emotional states give off. Um, I mean, even mainstream science knows that we do, but we can't see them, those frequencies, because it's outside of visible light, so we can't see it. And it's also an astral phenomenon. So when we are feeling extreme emotion, low vibrational emotion, fear, etc., we're pouring energy into the astral dimension where these entities are feeding off it in a satanic ritual. And one of the things that happens in these rituals is the um, the terror, energetic terror, infuses into the blood as a response an adrenaline, and this is adrenochrome. This is, the stories of adrenochrome, the drinking in Washington, and all that stuff. This is what the Satanists in our reality do. It's like a drug to them, gives them a high. They can go crazy, as people I've talked to have described when they drink this stuff. Um, so uh, we are giving off this energy. The point being that there is a way that when you leave the body, and what is happening? What is death? Death is that point where the body ceases to function. And what does it stop doing? It stops decoding the simulation. So it stops delivering this decoded sense of reality. Um, what happens when the computer um, screen goes blank and black? It stops decoding the internet, the Wi-Fi. And we say things like, my computer's died. So the body ceases to function. And when that happens, our consciousness is released into a completely different dimension of reality. But there is a way, if you hold your sense of identity of being consciousness, not um, a- unable to be entrapped. So go into this in the book in some detail. Then you can just you leave the body and you leave the matrix, all levels of it. Obviously, they don't want that to happen because they want to keep consciousness entrapped in this wheel of samsara. So we keep producing what has become known as loosh, this low vibrational energy. So in the first Matrix movie, when the Morpheus character held up the battery and said, the Matrix is a computer generated dream world designed to turn humans into one of these, it was a profound truth in an apparently fictional movie. So ideally, when you leave the body, you're out of here. And that's the ideal. But while we're here, this simulation is interactive, and the infusion of consciousness beyond the programs that um, are there to control us can change the nature of this reality. Um, when you get deeper and deeper into quantum physics, they are saying how confusing it is that they've shown in their studies that um, at the quantum level, you have the wave form, the frequency form, which is the information. Basically, what they're looking at is um, the simulation field. It's what they're looking at with the waveform at the quantum level. But what they are confused about is that when those waveform information um, phenomena are observed by human attention, the waveforms transforms into particle form. What? But it's perfectly explainable. Um, our sum total of our mental and emotional state and states, and the vast majority of it is in the subconscious. And if you look at what psychology suggests, it says that 95% of human behavior is generated by the subconscious, not the conscious mind, in reflex action or um, almost like robotic behavior. But it's coming from the subconscious, not the conscious mind, which is why you can react to certain things from the subconscious reaction. And then the conscious mind kicks in and says, oh my God, what was I doing? What was I thinking? Ah, you weren't. Your subconscious was. Um, and so the sum total of this conscious and subconscious field of perception is interacting with the quantum level of reality. It's interact. So you take the the frequency wave field at the quantum level, the below the so-called physical level, that is potential and possibility. And our state of perception interacts energetically with that through our attention, if you like, and manifests a projection, a decoded projection of our perceptual state into a particle form which we perceive as physical. So in this way, our perceptual field of sense of reality interacts with the potentiality of the quantum frequency fields and takes out of those fields a reality in particle, quote, physical form that relates to our perceptual field. So in this way, we can start to understand not just, as the old saying goes, we create our own reality, we can see how we do it. And so we look at people, for instance, that have a belief that they have no power, that they have no power over their lives, and they look to authority to tell them what to think because, well, obviously they don't know because they're, what do I know? I'm just little me. And they may think that the good things in life, things they'd really like to happen, never happen to them. What you believe, you perceive, and what you perceive, you experience. And this is how we're doing it, by our sense of reality becoming our experienced reality. One of the things I mention in the book, in the roadmap at one point, is a writer who set about trying to understand why some people are immensely, quote, successful and others are not. And he focused on, but the principle is the same. He focused on people who were what we would call the elite and how they became immensely rich. And what he found was they did a tremendous amount of what you might call visualization. They focused their mind on a certain reality, a certain outcome, and that's what they created. And it doesn't just apply to having lots of money, it applies to anything. And so this is another element of what that knows that it wants to keep from the population. It doesn't want the population to know that we're creating our own reality, let alone how we do it. But it wants to use that knowledge for its own ends. And this brings us to another point. If they can control the individual and collective perception of humanity, then subconscious as well as conscious, then they can get humanity to create the world, the reality that suits the cult and the other dimensional masters. And that's what they're doing. You know, people talk about, they say, oh, they have to tell us what they're doing. It's part of universal law. No, it's nothing to do with universal law. They have to let us know, especially subconsciously, what the plan is and where the world's going. Because if we take that on board and think, okay, that's the way the world's going to go, that's inevitable, we'll create that reality. This is what this phenomenon called preemptive programming is all about, where they present to you movies and television programs. My God, how many have we seen in the last decades that present the dystopian world that they want to create? Because in doing so, they're infusing, not least into the subconscious, this sense of reality and where the world's going. And we will, through this quantum process of interaction, create that world. This is why in all my books, I keep saying, where I said, this is the plan and this is what they want to happen, but it doesn't have to. If we awaken to what they don't want us to know, it doesn't have to happen. And it's vital that that is constantly emphasized, because if you fall into the it's inevitable, and you notice that's what they keep telling us. These AI people that want to fuse AI with humans and create this AI controlled human mind. You people like Musk and these other oligarchs, your Thiels in America, and your Mark Andreessens and your David Sachs, who's the AI czar of Trump. All these people, they're telling us that it's inevitable that AI will do what they want it to do. Musk, oh yeah, well, it could be the end of humanity, but it's inevitable. So we have to fuse with AI, otherwise humanity will die out. This is all part of the perceptual programming of inevitability, which collectively people then create. It's our minds, our consciousness, that is being used to create our own prison. And this is why awakening way, way beyond the political and financial level of the conspiracy is absolutely vital. Because without that awakening, we'll go on creating the reality we are being manipulated to create.
David, I wanted to ask you there because there's 8 billion people on the planet right now. And something that's going on is that there are these planned programs and realities that are being subconsciously programmed into us to inadvertently decide to go down that path. There is also many alternatives and infinite possibilities that we can go down. What do you feel is going to be the most important decision that humanity is going to make, especially in this next year, 2026, and the years after that, that will determine which reality we choose to experience ourselves? And are there parallel realities that then again get created if multiple populations and masses of people choose a different timeline per se?
Well, we all live in different realities anyway, as I spoke about earlier. The body is the common the common anchor that locks us into this reality. But in terms of consciousness, people are living in multiple realities now. It's about in answer to that question, it's about self-identity. That's the foundation of everything. If you identify with being human as your I, then you are immediately self-identifying with extreme levels of limitation, of I can't, of it's not possible, of ignorance. If you believe that you do have some form of soul, which is merely an energetic shell that allows us to experience the astral dimension, then, and you believe that there's some God up there. We always look up when we're talking about heaven or whatever. It's share the same space. All these different realities share the same space, just on different wavelengths. Um, if you think you're subordinate and under the control of some loving God who will send you to the fires of hell if you don't do what he says, um, and you are little me, and you have to bend the knee to God and his deities, then you again, you might perceive, if I'm good, I will maybe get to heaven, but you're still in a perceptual state of limitation and subordination. If you are in the human world and you are subordinate to authority because you believe yourself to be little me and I have no power and authority has all the power, it doesn't. It has our power, which we give to it in the form of acquiescence. Or you believe that there's some God in some other reality that's judging you and you have to do what he says, all that stuff. You will create that reality. And the common theme between the two is subordination to authority, whatever form you perceive it to take. And if that's your perception, that will be your reality. You will be subordinate to authority. 8 billion people controlled by a handful we call authority is ridiculous. Mathematically, it's insane. It's not possible unless the many give their power to the few in the form of acquiescence of various kinds. So self-identity, transforming our self-identity from believing the human form is the I, or believing that soul is the I under the control of some loving, in terms of the Old Testament and other religions, psychopathic God. Um, it's holding you in the trap, in the different levels of the matrix. But if you can self-identify who you are with being awareness, a state of being aware, an infinite state of awareness beyond this ludicrous enslavement trap, the simulation, then that's what you will connect with. That insight is what you will then start perceiving. And when you leave the body, you'll be freaking out of here, because they can't hold you in when you are within the you are not within the frequency band of the matrix. You see what they're doing, because they know that your state of consciousness, your state of perception, manifests as a frequency. They're seeking to keep you in a state of perception, both in the human world and in the astral world, in the form of, quote, soul, where your perceptions are not generating a frequency that allows you to leave the matrix. That's what the whole thing is founded on. So once you expand your awareness through your self-identity with being beyond the matrix, beyond its version of God, beyond its version of you're just a human accident that came from some primordial soup, and you start self-identifying with being the infinity beyond it, your frequency, the frequency that you are operating on, the frequency of your perceptual field, um, is way beyond the limitations of the matrix. And at that point, within the matrix, within the human body experience, you're seeing the world in a completely different way because you're in the world with the body, but you're not of the world in terms of your perception of reality. And when you leave the body, you're out of here. You're out of here. Bye. See ya. But they don't want that. They want to hold us in perceptual states of limitation and limited self-identity, whereby we stay within the walls, the frequency walls of the matrix.
What's your view, David, on ascended masters, someone like Jesus, that came at a very significant moment in time and history of human evolution? Was that an incarnate consciousness that knew already who it was and didn't forget? Or did Jesus also have to go through this process of awakening to remember his I am self?
I don't believe any of it. Of the 28 chapters in the roadmap, 5 are about religion, because it's a fundamental foundation of human control. 8 billion people, and it's estimated that about 5.4 billion self-identify with either being a Christian, a Muslim, or a Hindu. Never mind all the others. Fundamental, it's a foundation of human control. And what I look at in 3 of the chapters, in fact 4 of the chapters, is I'm looking at what we're told to believe in the different religions and where they came from and what the evidence is that they're telling us the truth. And let's say it doesn't pass the test, because, for instance, if you look at the Old Testament and the stories of the Old Testament on which the New Testament is based, and to a very large extent, people don't realize this, on which Islam is based, which came a lot of centuries later, there is no evidence and no archaeological evidence, when there absolutely should be, that these stories are true. First of all, there's a common theme between the Old Testament, the New Testament, and Islam. And it's that the writings came long after the alleged events. So how was that communicated then? And what are we doing believing without question texts from thousands of years ago that no one can tell who wrote them and why and what circumstances and what was their motivation? And one of the motivation of the scribes, the Old Testament scribes, was that they wanted to create a fake history, which actually was inspired by the area of the world we call Mesopotamia, the land between 2 rivers. It's now Iraq and part of Syria. Sumerian tablets that came from thousands of years ago, is the foundation of so much in the Old Testament. Didn't happen in the area of what we now call Israel. It happened in Mesopotamia. You know, you've got the story of Noah in the Old Testament, and the flood. Well, you find exactly the same story with different names in the Sumerian tablets from thousands of years earlier. You look at the Exodus, where Moses is supposed to have led his Israelites to freedom from the Pharaoh in Egypt. But first of all, um, the Egyptian chroniclers and recorders of their times um, don't mention anything about it. Like the Romans, Egyptians were real chroniclers of detailed things. No mention of plagues of locusts and plagues of frogs. No mention of the Israelites fleeing the Pharaoh. And the Bible talks about 600,000 men fleeing overnight, led by Moses from the Pharaoh. Okay, 600,000 men. Add the women, add the children, and it's estimated you're talking about maybe 2 million people. Then add all the animals, the domestic animals, the cattle and what have you. And somehow they are supposed to flee overnight, pursued by Egyptian troops in their chariots. And then God opened the Red Sea and they went through, and then the Red Sea was brought back when the chariots were pursuing them. And then these 2 million people were supposed to have walked around a very small, actually, desert for 40 years. And I quote in the roadmap two Jewish archaeologists who are looking at the evidence for any of this happening and many other things in the biblical story. And of course, being Jewish archaeologists, they have no interest or investment in, and there's no benefit to them of saying actually none of it ever happened. But that's what they do. If you had 2 million people traveling around a desert, a small desert, there would be endless archaeological remains. There'd be phenomenal numbers of graves, of animal bones, and all the things that would have happened. And how do you feed 2 million people in a desert? Oh, well, manna from heaven. Oh, thank you. That's a good one. Hold on a minute. We've got a problem here. How would they have eaten? Oh, we'll have God producing manna from heaven. Yeah, okay. And then another thing is that Moses is supposed to have led the people into the desert to get away from the Pharaoh. Well, it just so happens that there is archaeological evidence from that period in that desert area and elsewhere in what we now call Israel, of Egyptian forts. The Egyptians controlled that entire land. But somehow you flee the Pharaoh into a land controlled by the same Pharaoh, and oh, don't ask too many questions, mate. It's like in journalism, they used to say, don't make too many phone calls. It spoils a good story. Because you find out it's not true. And then Moses hands over to Joshua, and he, on God's say so, goes and slaughters the Canaanites. And part of that slaughter was to bring down the walls of Jericho. And so they're supposed to have, blown their trumpets, and the walls came tumbling down. Just so happens that there were no walls in Jericho. And, this is a point, not just about the Old Testament, the New Testament as well. is that because it was written after the period in which it's supposed to have happened, so that applies particularly to the Old Testament, long, long after, like 1,000 years sometimes after, 1,500 years sometimes after, in terms of the existence of Abraham, who was born in Mesopotamia, so the Bible tells us, Sumer, Shinar, as the Bible calls it, um, many places that did not exist then, but existed at the time the writers were writing, were included in the stories, which when they didn't exist at the time the stories were supposed to have taken place. When you then come into the New Testament stories, even though there's no evidence that all this stuff took place in the Old Testament, the New Testament has been written in terms of the Gospels anyway, and more besides, that basically um, appears to be, it was written for that reason, as I talk about in the book, uh, an an ongoing projection from the Old Testament. So the Jesus figure in the Gospels talks about figures in the Old Testament, which clearly did not exist. They're Mesopotamian stories, if they existed at all. And then you look at Islam, and people don't. Most people don't realize this. Islam includes in its story many of the people from the Old Testament and New Testament. So it talks about Moses. It talks about Abraham. Abraham's a big figure in Islam and Mecca, and it talks about Mother Mary. It talks about Jesus, but says no, Jesus was not the last prophet. Muhammad was. And the biographies of Muhammad were written long after Muhammad died, or supposed to have died in 632 AD. So you've got this stream which comes from the Old Testament stories that cannot be supported by the evidence when it should be in many cases, through the New Testament into Islam. And what was we talking about almost right at the start? You get people into unquestioning belief systems, and then you play them off against each other to divide and rule. And that is what we are looking at. And that's why this book, The Roadmap, will be so controversial, but it will also make sense of the apparently unexplainable. And that's why I wrote it.
Got it right here, brother. Thank you and your team for sending it over. We end every show, David, with a segment called The Final Trio, which are some rapid fire questions at the end, like we did last time. Before that, where would you want to send everyone to connect with you, with your work, the massive resources that you provide? We'll also link everyone to go and grab a copy of the roadmap. Where would you send everyone else to connect?
They can get a copy of the roadmap at davidicke.com. We also have a fantastic media platform called iconic.com, which does full-length documentaries on everything from what's happening day to day to the nature of reality and all the things we've been talking about. So they can get that at iconic.com. In fact, we are hoping to have a lot of Spanish translations in the coming months, and so there's that, if they go to my YouTube channel, um,
It's back online after 5.5
yeah,
years.
banned for 5.5 years, but suddenly they're letting everybody back, and there's reasons for that. But um, you know, we were interacting with them, shall we say? My son was, Jamie, saying, "Look, you've let all these people back. Why not? Why not me?" And eventually they relented, and it happened. So that's been a real boost, and people can go there. There's the videos are posted there week after week, new videos, and there's a whole unbelievable library of videos going way back into the 1990s as well, which if people today who've not seen them just have a look, they'll think, my God, he was saying what's happening now in the 1990s. How was he
Yeah.
doing that? Simple. You work to uncover what they know and the cult knows and what their agenda is, what their plan is, and then you tell people. And if nothing happens to intervene in the plan, then it happens. And people think you've predicted the future. You haven't. You predicted the plan. And so what we need now is that intervention. And we can bring it down so fast if we put down the fault lines of division and divide and rule and to start to unite against a common threat to all of us.
I normally never do or say this in an interview, but I would encourage everyone today to share this episode and this message, which with whoever you feel called to share it with. Also, leaving a comment really helps this video and this message get out there to people. I was looking back. You opened up talking about the Overton window, and I was looking back at your 1991 interview with Terry Wogan. And I just imagine how differently that message would have been received today, and what you endured for years of ridicule and isolation from society. I wanted to ask you in the final trio what you feel has been the hardest part of carrying this message, and also what has been the most beautiful.
Um, well, in many ways, it's the same thing. Like I said earlier, when you are talking about a description of reality that's very different to um, people's sense of normal, then you are going to get ridicule and you're going to get abuse. I still do, but a fraction of what it used to be, because events um, have made that happen. And you know, so when you go into it, you know that's going to happen. I mean, people were saying to me long ago, 30 odd years ago, 36 years ago now, didn't you know you get ridicule when you said so and so? And, I'm like, well, I'd worked that out. Yeah. But what are you going to do? Are you going to have the self confidence and the commitment to what you're trying to do, to say it knowing what the consequences are going to be, but also knowing that if what you say has validity, it will eventually be shown to be so. It might take some time, but eventually it will if it has validity. And then people will say, hold on a minute, that guy said that all that time ago. But if you submit to this prison called the fear of what other people think and the fear of what other people will do, you don't say it. And so when it happens and you say, I knew this would happen, I knew this was going to happen, people say, oh, yeah, of course you did, mate, of course you did. But in my case, because I said it and wrote it, it's there to be seen. Yeah, it is happening. And the other side of it is the, well, the frustration of what seemed for a long time like talking to a wall. That that was a challenge, but then the enormous satisfaction of seeing minds open to things they would have rejected and waved away not so long ago is it's a phenomenal sense of joy and achievement, because this is the road, the open mind road, that we have to pursue to bring this nonsense to an end. And if those minds do not open beyond those walls of indoctrinated belief in all its forms, then this force will reach its end goal. But it can't. It can't if we awaken beyond its programming and unite beyond its divide and rule, because a few people can't control 8 billion. If the 8 billion know what the game is, and B, refuse to cooperate with it. So we are looking in the eye of the storm now, but it's still reversible. It's just a choice, and it's time to make it.
I would rewatch that part a few times. David, we'll end here with the question: what is the deepest source of hope inside you that has never been shaken? And what has kept that flame alive all of these years?
Well, knowing that I am an expression of infinite awareness, I am eternal, and I am on an endless journey of exploring forever. And this is a brief experience in which you seek to do everything you can to uncover and communicate the nature of the human prison, so it ceases to be a prison, because it's a perceptual prison, and thus information can change perception, which demolishes ultimately the prison. But it's also the knowledge, the awareness that whatever happens, you're still all that is, has been, and ever can be, having a brief human experience in which you're doing your best to make a difference, but whatever, it's just an experience. The point being that we need to be in control of when that experience ends. And through the wheel of samsara, we are currently not, through ignorance of the situation in which we find ourselves. So I just, when you open to consciousness beyond the program, what you tend to do is what you feel is right. You don't go through this mental gymnastics of what will people think of me, or say about me, or do about me if I say this. You say and do what you feel is right, and you don't make a list of all the consequences of doing what you believe to be right. You just do it. Because, if you start a list of all the consequences in this world of many things that people do that are necessary to do, then you'll reach a point on the list where you'll say, okay, I'd like to do it. I'd like to do what I know to be right, but not that badly. But if you really mean it, then you just do it, and whatever consequences come, because in the end, I'm out of here, and I'll still be all that is, has been, and ever can be. Uh, I can handle that.
Just to say, David, thank you so much for your heart, your dedication to the truth, to humanity, to your own exploration of consciousness. It's a pleasure always to connect with you and to weave together. It's my highest honor. And I would love to continue these chats. I feel like they're getting deeper and deeper each time. And I know I'll be a student of your work for the years to come. So thank you so much, David. And I hope to do this again very, very soon.
But deep within you, you know it will. Everybody does. We've just forgotten and been encouraged to forget. That's the point.
Much love. Thank you.
See you, mate. All the best.